Divorced men. What happened when she realized you became everything she tried to destroy? Story 1. When my ex left, she didn't just want a divorce. She wanted a crater. She told people I was unstable, hinted I was an addict, I don't even drink, and called my boss out of concern. She accidentally emailed screenshots of my private text to my mom. The best part? She'd cry in public about escaping me while privately DMing my friends to fish for dirt. I lost a promotion, half my circle, and for a few months I honestly thought she'd win by exhausting me. So I stopped playing defense. I got a lawyer who didn't flinch. I started documenting everything. And I moved into a one-bedroom that looked like a prison cell with a couch. I went to therapy like it was the gym. I started running. I ate boring food. I kept my mouth shut. A year later, I'd rebuilt enough trust at work to switch companies and double my salary. I was quiet about it until the day she showed up at our kids' school event dressed like a new me, smiling too hard. She walked over like we were old friends and said, "Wow, you look different." I just nodded. My son ran up and yelled, "Dad, are we still going to your new house with the big tree?" Her face actually glitched. Later, she cornered me near the parking lot and hissed, "So you're doing fine now?" Like it offended her. She tried the soft voice next. "We should talk sometime." "I've been thinking," I said. "There's nothing to think about. You got what you wanted." And that's when she realized the divorce didn't ruin me. It removed the weight she kept tying to my ankles. Story 2. My ex-wife wasn't loud about destroying me. She was surgical. She drained our joint account the week before she filed. She waited until I was at my lowest, then told the court I couldn't manage finances because I'd missed one bill while working overtime. She got our friends to treat me like a disease. Nobody asked what happened, they just stopped replying. After the settlement, she celebrated like she'd won a game show. She posted selfies with captions about choosing peace. Meanwhile, I was in a rented room eating noodles and trying not to panic every time my phone buzzed. The turning point came from something stupid. A free community workshop on resumes at the library. I went because it was warm inside. A retired guy there ripped my resume apart in the kindest way possible and told me I wasn't starting over. I was starting correctly. I took a job that wasn't glamorous but had training. I started building certifications at night. I showed up early, stayed late, and said no to drama. 2 years later, I was managing a small team and renting an actual apartment with my daughter's room painted her favorite color. My ex found out because our daughter innocently told her, "Dad has a snack drawer now." Like a hotel. She started texting me things that looked like casual questions. "Are you still at that same place? What hours do you work now? Do you think you'll ever move?" Then she slipped, "You're doing all this because of me." I replied, "No, I'm doing it because of me." The next custody exchange, she showed up with a gift bag and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She tried to walk into my building like she belonged there. The doorman stopped her and asked for her name. Watching her forced to announce herself out loud, like she wasn't the narrator of my life anymore, was the moment she finally understood. She'd taken everything she could, and still couldn't take the part of me that was willing to rebuild. Story 3. My ex didn't want me to fail quietly. She wanted a spectacle. She'd pick fights in public, then cry when I asked her to stop. She'd bait me in texts and then screenshot my frustrated replies and send them to my sister like, "Is he okay?" She once threatened to call the police during an argument, then smirked when I backed off. When we divorced, she expected me to spiral. She told mutual friends she was worried I'd do something stupid. She even tried to get my own mother to check on me more, like she was the concerned hero. So I got boring on purpose. I installed a parenting app for communication and stopped answering anything outside of kid logistics. I started taking boxing classes. Not to fight, just to have somewhere safe to put the adrenaline. I stopped reacting. Her power source was my reaction. 6 months later, she messaged, "You've been so cold lately." I replied, "I'm being clear." The real karma hit when she tried to repeat her pattern with her next boyfriend. She called me one night, voice shaking, asking if I could take our son early because something happened. I agreed because our kid comes first. At drop-off, she looked wrecked and kept glancing at my car like it was a life raft. She finally blurted, "How did you get so okay?" I wanted to be petty. I wanted to say, "By not being married to you." But my kid was right there, so I just said, "One day at a time." She stared at me like I'd just spoken a foreign language. Later, she texted, "I thought you needed me." I typed, deleted, typed again, and finally sent, "You needed me to need you." She stopped messaging after that. Not because she suddenly respected boundaries, but because she realized the version of me she tried to provoke into ruin didn't exist anymore. Story 4. My ex-wife tried to destroy me through my reputation. She worked in the same industry and she played it like chess. She'd warn people about me at networking events. She'd casually mention that I was hard to work with, emotional, not stable under pressure. Meanwhile, she'd smile at me at parties like we were fine. I didn't find out until a recruiter ghosted me after an amazing interview. A friend finally pulled me aside and said, "Dude, she's talking." I wanted to go nuclear. I wanted to post receipts. But my lawyer said, "Win quietly." So I did the least satisfying thing possible. I focused on output. I built a portfolio so undeniable that gossip sounded ridiculous next to it. I volunteered for projects nobody wanted. I took feedback like it was oxygen. A year later, I got an offer from a company she'd wanted for ages. I didn't announce it. I just changed my LinkedIn and went to work. 2 weeks after my first day, she messaged me. "Congrats, heard the news." Then, "I could probably help you navigate the culture there." "I know people." I stared at the phone and laughed. She tried to burn every bridge in front of me and was now offering to be my tour guide across the river. At our next mediation check-in, we still had a few loose ends. She showed up in full confident mode until she saw the email signature on a document my attorney forwarded. My new title. My new company. Her eyes flicked to it like it physically hurt. She tried to act casual. "Must be nice," I said. "It is." She leaned in and whispered, "You think you're better than me now?" I whispered back, "No, I think I'm free." For the first time, she had nothing to say. All her careful sabotage had done was push me into a place where her voice couldn't reach. Story 5. My ex didn't come after my money or my job. She came after my identity. She mocked my hobbies, rolled her eyes at my goals, and told me I was embarrassing whenever I tried something new. When we split, she kept the same script. "He's a loser. Always has been." She expected me to stay small because it made her feel large. After the divorce, I realized how quiet my apartment was. No commentary, no sighs, no sarcasm. I started doing the things I'd shelved to keep the peace. Photography, cooking, even learning a second language because I'd always wanted to travel. I posted photos sometimes. Not thirst traps, just sunsets, street scenes, little moments. People responded, not with pity, with genuine interest. Eventually, one of my photos got picked up by a local gallery's themed show. It wasn't a life-changing fame moment, but it was mine. I invited my brother and a few friends. I didn't invite her, obviously. Guess who showed up anyway? She walked in like she was scouting a threat. She read the little label next to my piece, then looked around like she expected someone to jump out and yell, "Surprise! It's fake!" When she spotted me, she forced a laugh. "Since when are you doing this?" I said. "Since I stopped asking permission to exist." She tried to pivot into nostalgia. "Remember when you used to talk about this stuff?" I said. "Yeah. You used to call it stupid." Her smile cracked for half a second, like she'd just been reminded of a bet she placed and lost. She circled back later and said, softer, "You're really happy, aren't you?" I looked at the photo on the wall, then at the friends who came just because they were proud of me. "Yeah," I said. "I am." She nodded like she understood, but her eyes said something else. She realized she didn't leave a loser. She left a person she'd been shrinking. And the second she was gone, he expanded. Story 6. After the divorce, my ex didn't just want to move on. She wanted to rewrite the ending so I looked like the villain who finally got what he deserved. She started a quiet campaign, calling mutual friends to check on them, hinting that I'd been controlling, dropping little lines like, "I'm just glad I got out safely." Nobody confronted me directly. People just went cold. Invitations stopped. Group chats went silent. I was furious, but I did the only thing that actually works long-term. I stopped performing for the jury. I got a therapist. I went to the gym at the same time every day. I deleted the urge to defend myself online. I kept my communication with her strictly about our kid, and I kept it polite enough that any screenshot would make her look unhinged. Not me. 6 months later, the first crack appeared. One of her closest friends messaged me privately, "Hey, I'm sorry. I'm starting to notice patterns." A year later, I was promoted. Quietly. No big announcement. My kids started saying stuff like, "Dad doesn't get mad like Mom. Dad just fixes things." That line traveled back to her like smoke. Then came the moment she realized I hadn't been destroyed. At a school event, she marched up with that fake bright smile and said, "So, you're doing better now?" Like it was a personal insult. I said, "I'm doing healthier." She scoffed. "Must be nice not having anyone holding you accountable." I looked right at her and said, "I am accountable. That's why I'm fine." Her face tightened. Because what she wanted was a broken man she could point at forever. And what she got was someone who rebuilt without needing her approval or her apology. Story 7. My ex tried to destroy me through court, but not in the obvious way. She didn't scream or throw things. She played the helpless saint. Every filing painted me as unpredictable, emotionally unsafe, financially irresponsible. She made sure the first impression of me in that courtroom was a problem to manage. For a while it worked. I lost time with my kids. I paid more than I could afford. I slept on a mattress on the floor and ate whatever was cheapest. I kept thinking, if I can just prove I'm not who she says I am. Then my lawyer hit me with a brutal truth. Court doesn't reward good people. It rewards documentation. So I became a spreadsheet in human form. Every pickup, every payment, every message. I kept my tone calm, even when she tried to bait me with lines like, "The kids are scared of you," or "You always make everything about you." I replied like a robot. Dates, times, facts. 2 years later, the judge didn't even look at her performance. He looked at the record. Her contradictions stacked up. My consistency did the talking. Custody adjusted. Support recalculated. Her control started slipping. At the next exchange, she stood beside her car and said, "You got lucky." I smiled. "No, I got organized." And that's when she snapped, just for a second. "You think you're better than me?" I said. "I think I'm harder to manipulate." She stared like she couldn't compute it, because she had spent years trying to make me look chaotic. But the version of me she created in her stories couldn't survive contact with the version of me who kept receipts. Story 8. When we divorced, my ex made sure I felt small. She kept the house, the furniture, most of the friends. She even kept my dog for a while because she knew it would hurt. She told people I abandoned the family, like I hadn't been begging for basic respect for years. I moved into a tiny apartment with white walls and the echo of my own footsteps. The first night, I sat on the floor and realized something. No one was laughing at me anymore. No one was rolling their eyes when I spoke. No one was turning every mistake into a character flaw. So I started doing things I wasn't allowed to do before. I cooked. I learned how to dress like an adult instead of a tired husband. I took a weekend course in something I'd always wanted. I stopped apologizing for existing. The funniest part? I didn't level up to impress anyone. I leveled up because it was peaceful. One day she texted me randomly, "I saw you. You look different." I replied, "I feel different." She followed with, "You didn't do any of that when we were together." That one hit like a trap, because she wanted me to agree with her narrative, that she was the reason I was better, or that I had withheld my best self from her. So I wrote back, "I couldn't do it with you because you punished me for improving." She didn't respond for a full day. Then, "That's not fair," I said. Neither was the marriage. After that, she didn't compliment me again, because compliments were never the point. The point was control. And she'd just realized she no longer had it. Story 9. My ex tried to destroy my relationship with my own family. She'd call my mom worried about me, then casually drop a lie that made me sound unstable. She'd tell my sister I was spiraling. When they asked me, I'd deny it, and she'd act like I was gaslighting them. It was poison with a smile. After the divorce, she kept doing it, like she wanted to keep me isolated even after we were done. I could feel my family walking on eggshells around me, waiting for me to prove the rumors true. So I stopped arguing and started showing. I visited every Sunday. I helped my dad fix things around the house. I stayed consistent, calm, present. I asked my mom about her garden and actually listened. I built trust the slow way, brick by brick, not with speeches. Eventually, my sister pulled me aside and said, "I don't know why I believed her." I said, "Because she spoke confidently." Then came the day my ex tried to crawl back into the narrative. She showed up to a family birthday party. We have kids, so it happens sometimes. Acting like she was still the center. She made a joke at my expense, expecting laughs. Nobody laughed. My mom just looked at her and said politely, "We don't do that anymore." I swear my ex went pale. She tried to smile it off, but the room had shifted. The spell broke. Later, she cornered me and whispered, "You turned them against me." I said, "No, you trained them to expect chaos." I showed them peace. She walked away like she'd been slapped, not because I was cruel, but because she finally understood. The people she tried to recruit as weapons had stopped being weapons. Story 10. After the divorce, she treated my recovery like theft, like I'd stolen happiness that belonged to her. She'd text me at weird hours. "Are you seeing someone? Do you even miss your old life? You move on fast." Meanwhile, she was the one who filed and told everyone she was finally free. I didn't respond to most of it. I learned that her questions weren't curiosity. They were fishing hooks. What she didn't expect was that I'd rebuild my life in a way that didn't include revenge. I didn't trash her online. I didn't try to win the breakup. I just got better. I got healthier. I got quieter. I got stable. One night, she called me crying, saying she'd made a mistake and she felt like her life was falling apart. I listened, because I'm not heartless. And then I said gently, "I'm sorry you're hurting, but I can't be your emergency contact anymore." Silence. Then rage. "So you're just going to leave me like that?" I said. You left me a long time ago. I just stopped chasing. She tried bargaining. We could try again. For real. You owe it to our history. That line almost worked because it was familiar. It was the old leash, but I'd changed. So I said, history isn't a contract. The next exchange, she looked at me like she didn't recognize me. Like she kept waiting for the broken man to show up so she could feel powerful again. And when he didn't, she finally realized the thing she tried hardest to destroy wasn't my money or my reputation. It was my self-respect. And she failed. Story 11. My ex had a talent for turning my best traits into weaknesses. If I stayed calm, I was cold. If I tried to talk things through, I was manipulating. If I worked extra hours, I was avoiding the family. By the time she filed, she'd already trained a handful of people to see me as the problem. So, when the divorce papers hit, it felt like everyone had already voted. For a while, I played the old role. I over-explained. I apologized for things I didn't do. I tried to be understood by someone committed to misunderstanding me. Then one day my therapist said, "You're trying to win a case in the court of someone else's ego." That line changed everything. I stopped arguing and started living. I took my kid to the park after work even if I was tired. I cooked simple meals and made the apartment feel like a home. I started sleeping again. I got my finances straight. I started saying no without decorating it with guilt. She noticed the change like a person notices a missing tooth. At exchanges, she'd scan me up and down, waiting for the cracks. Once she said, "You seem confident." I shrugged. "I'm stable." She laughed, but it sounded forced. "Sure. Must be nice to pretend nothing happened." I looked at her and said, "I'm not pretending. I'm recovering." Her face tightened. Because in her mind, recovery was her territory. She was supposed to be the one who escaped and healed. I was supposed to be the cautionary tale. Later, I heard she'd been telling people, "He changed just to make me look bad." And that's when I realized the truth. To her, my peace wasn't proof of my growth. It was proof she didn't have power anymore. Story 12. My ex tried to wreck me at my job by planting doubt. She didn't call my boss directly. She was smarter than that. She'd run into coworkers at events and mention how stressed I'd been at home, how she worried about my temper, how she hoped work wasn't too much pressure for me. It was always framed like concern, always soft, always poisonous. I started getting left off projects. My manager started asking weird questions like, "Everything okay at home?" I could feel it. The invisible smear. The little story traveling without me. I wanted to expose her, but I knew it would sound like paranoia. So I did something that felt unfair. I outperformed the rumor. I documented deliverables. I asked for everything in writing. I took a leadership course. I became the guy who solved problems without drama. 6 months later, a big opportunity opened up. I applied. My manager hesitated. Then HR requested a reference call with someone from my previous team, someone my ex had tried to charm. That coworker told HR the truth. He's consistent, professional, no issues. Honestly, he handled a rough divorce with more composure than most people handle a flat tire. I got the role. The next time my ex asked for a quick chat, she casually slipped, "So, work is going okay for you?" I said, "It's going great. I'm leading the new initiative." Her smile froze for half a beat. Then she tried to recover. "Wow, I didn't think they'd trust you with that." I nodded. "They trust results." She stared at me like she'd just realized her favorite weapon. Whispers. Didn't work against numbers and performance. And for the first time, she looked genuinely afraid. Not of me. Afraid that she couldn't control how the world saw me anymore. Story 13. My ex used our kids like a mirror. Whatever she wanted to believe about me, she'd say the kids felt it. "They're nervous around you. They said you're always angry. They don't like your apartment." Meanwhile, the kids would run into my arms at pickup and talk my ear off the whole drive. The dissonance was exhausting. I realized she wasn't reporting their feelings. She was trying to manufacture them. So I made my time with them boring in the best way. Predictable bedtime. Clean snacks. Homework at the table. A little routine. A lot of listening. I didn't interrogate them about mom. I didn't play detective. I just made my home safe. Then the kids started saying things without meaning to. Like, "Mom asks what you talk about," or "Mom says you're only nice because you want people to like you." That last one hit hard. I asked carefully, "And what do you think?" My oldest said, "I think you're nice because you're always like this." Weeks later at mediation, my ex tried her usual line. "The kids say they feel more comfortable with me." The mediator asked a simple question. "Can you give examples?" She stumbled, because her examples were all vibes and accusations. Mine were schedules, school notes, teacher emails, and a calendar full of consistent involvement. Afterward, in the parking lot, she snapped, "You're turning them against me." I said, "No, I'm letting them see reality." She glared. You're just trying to win. I looked at my kids climbing into my car, laughing about something stupid, and said, this isn't winning, this is parenting. That's when she realized she couldn't destroy my bond with them by narrating it. Because the kids were old enough to notice who was steady and who was always staging a scene. Story 14. In the marriage, my ex treated my hobbies like a joke. I played guitar as a stress relief. She called it midlife cringe. If I practiced, she'd sigh dramatically and say I was ignoring real responsibilities, so I stopped. Over time, I stopped a lot of things. I got smaller, quieter, easier to manage. After the divorce, the silence of my new place felt like oxygen. I bought a used guitar and started again. Nothing crazy, just an hour at night instead of doom scrolling. Then I started posting short clips online because, for once, no one was in the room rolling their eyes. The clips got attention. Not viral fame attention. Real, steady interest. A local bar offered me a small paid set. I said yes, terrified. Guess who showed up? She sat in the back with a friend, wearing that look like she was waiting for me to embarrass myself. When I finished, people clapped, a couple folks asked about my next gig, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Proud, without permission. Afterward, she cornered me and said, so now you're doing this little performance thing? I smiled. Yeah, it's fun, she scoffed. You never had motivation when we were together, I said. I had motivation. I just didn't have room. Her face hardened. So you're saying I held you back? I said, I'm saying you needed me to be smaller so you could feel bigger. She opened her mouth, then shut it. Because deep down she knew. She'd spent years trying to make me ashamed of being myself. And there I was, on a tiny stage, proving that the version of me she tried to erase had simply been waiting for quiet to return. Story 15. My ex's favorite move was bait-and-switch kindness. She'd sabotage something, my plans, my relationships, my confidence, then show up like a nurse. I'm here if you need me. It made me feel crazy. Like I couldn't even be mad because she was offering help for the mess she created. After divorce, she tried to keep the pattern alive. She'd text, just checking on you. Then, a few messages later, you know, you always struggled without me. I stopped replying. Not angrily. Just stopped. That's when she escalated. She started telling people I was isolating and depressed. A mutual friend called me to ask if I was okay. I realized she was still trying to own the narrative. If I was quiet, it must mean I was failing. So I did something that felt petty but wasn't. I started showing up in my own life, publicly and calmly. I reconnected with friends one-on-one. I joined a weekend sports league. I attended a charity event my coworker hosted. Not to prove a point, just to rebuild community. Eventually, the mutual friend circle saw the contrast. I was steady. She was always campaigning. At a custody exchange, she finally blurted, why won't you talk to me like a normal person? I said, because you don't talk. You manage. She blinked. What does that even mean? I said, it means every conversation is a trap, and I'm done stepping in them. Her voice got sharp. So you think you're some healed, evolved man now? I looked at her and said, no, I'm just not yours to shape anymore. She stood there, stunned, like she'd expected me to keep orbiting her gravity forever. And that was the moment she realized. The man she tried to break didn't come back begging. He came back silent, stable, and unreachable. Story 16. My ex's favorite weapon was humiliation disguised as jokes. In front of friends, she'd call me soft, slow, the human reminder list. If I reacted, I was too sensitive. If I stayed quiet, she'd smirk like she'd proven something. After the divorce, she kept trying to get that same reaction, posting inspirational quotes about surviving narcissists, tagging mutuals, letting everyone connect the dots without ever saying my name. I stopped feeding it. I blocked, muted, and moved like a ghost. I also started doing something I'd never done in the marriage. I invested in myself without asking permission. I got a coach at the gym. I started dressing like I respected my own life. I learned to cook meals that didn't come from a box. I fixed my sleep. My face changed. My posture changed. At our kids' recital, she spotted me in the crowd and did a literal double take. She marched over, scanning me like she was looking for the old version she could poke. Wow, she said. You're really trying, huh? I smiled. I'm just living. She leaned in, lowering her voice. So what? You want people to think you're the good guy now? I said. I don't care what people think. I care what my kid sees. That answer hit her harder than any insult could have. Because she'd spent years trying to make me perform for public approval. And now I wasn't performing for anyone, especially not her. Later I heard she told someone, he's changed. It's creepy. Creepy. Like discipline and peace were suspicious. That's when it clicked. She didn't hate my growth because it made me better. She hated it because it made her tactics useless. Story 17. She tried to destroy me financially in a way that sounded reasonable. She insisted we keep our joint credit card for the kids. Then she ran it up. School clothes, groceries, emergency purchases, while telling everyone I was a deadbeat for not helping. When I finally confronted her, she acted offended. So you don't care about your children? I almost drowned in that trap. For months, I paid what I could just to keep the card from going to collections, all while she kept charging it. Every time I tried to set a boundary, she'd threaten, "Fine, I'll tell the court you're refusing to provide." Then my lawyer said 2 words that saved my life: separate everything. I opened my own accounts. I paid support through official channels only. I stopped funding her chaos. She immediately exploded, messaging me paragraphs about how I was abusing her by cutting her off. The funny part? Once the money pipeline ended, her concerns about the kids suddenly became very flexible. A year later, I was stable. Not rich, stable. No late fees. No panic. I had a budget that worked. I even started saving, which felt like science fiction. She found out when she tried to renegotiate something, and I calmly said, "No, that's not in the order." She blinked. "Since when do you know all this?" I said. "Since I stopped paying for your shortcuts." She smirked like she was about to win anyway and said, "You think you're in control now?" I looked at her and said, "I'm not in control of you. I'm in control of me. That's the whole point." Her face fell. Because she'd spent years making my life a financial fog, counting on my confusion. And now I was clear. You can't manipulate someone who finally understands the rules. Story 18. My ex wanted to destroy my dating life before it even started. The moment we divorced, she started calling me unsafe in vague ways. Not accusations she could prove, just enough smoke to make people step back. When she found out I'd gone on a single date, she messaged the woman on social media with a girl-to-girl warning. The date ended before it began. I was embarrassed, angry, and honestly tempted to give up. It felt like she could still reach through the divorce papers and pull my life back into her drama. So I changed strategy. I stopped trying to date in circles where her shadow existed. I focused on building a life I actually liked, friends who weren't shared, routines that were mine, hobbies that didn't involve mutual connections. Months later, I met someone through a volunteer group. No overlap, no history, just normal. When my ex eventually found out, she tried her usual move, an icy text pretending to be casual. "So you're seeing someone? Interesting." I didn't bite. I replied, "Yes, please keep communication to the kids." She escalated. "Does she know what you're really like?" I replied, "She knows me, not your version of me." At the next exchange, my ex showed up early, trying to catch a glimpse. When my girlfriend pulled up to pick me up after, my ex's face tightened like she'd swallowed a lemon. She stared at her, then at me, like she was trying to figure out what spell I'd used. After my girlfriend drove off, my ex said, "You're just trying to replace me." I said, "No, I'm replacing the chaos." That's when she realized her biggest fear wasn't me finding someone else. It was me finding peace and not needing her, even as an enemy. Story 19. My ex tried to destroy my confidence by making my emotions feel illegal. If I was hurt, I was dramatic. If I was quiet, I was punishing. If I was happy, I was fake. After the divorce, she kept poking at the same wound. "No one will put up with you. You're going to be alone. You're not built for real life." For a while, I believed it. Not fully, but enough that I hesitated before trying anything new, like my brain was still asking for her approval. Then my kid said something small that cracked everything open. We were building a cheap IKEA shelf together, and I messed up a step. I sighed, expecting the usual criticism. My kid shrugged and said, "We can just fix it. It's not a big deal." I realized that's what normal sounds like. Mistakes aren't moral failures. They're just mistakes. I started treating myself like I'd treat my kid. I'd mess up, I'd adjust, I'd move on. I started learning again. Skills, routines, patience. My life became quiet in a way that felt almost suspicious at first. Then my ex saw me thriving and tried to re-enter. Not with love, but with relevance. She started sending memories, old photos, inside jokes, nostalgia bait. I ignored it. At a pickup, she finally said, "You don't even seem sad." I said, "I processed it already." She scoffed. "So you're over me?" I replied, "I'm over the version of me that tolerated you." Her eyes widened, like she'd never considered that the divorce didn't just end a marriage, it ended her access to the insecure man she'd built. And suddenly she was staring at someone she couldn't shame back into a cage. Story 20. My ex tried to destroy my future by sabotaging my present. During the marriage, every time I talked about going back to school, she'd laugh and say, "With what time? With what brain?" When I mentioned changing careers, she'd say, "Be realistic. You're not that guy. After divorce, I was exhausted but free. I signed up for night classes anyway. One course just to prove I could. I'd sit in the back, dead tired, taking notes like my life depended on it. She found out because she snooped through our kid's backpack and saw my campus flyer. She texted me immediately. "So now you're pretending to be ambitious?" I replied, "I'm not pretending." She sent a paragraph about how I was wasting money and neglecting responsibilities. It was almost funny, hearing the same script from someone who used to spend thousands on things that impressed strangers. 2 years later, I graduated. Not with fireworks, just a quiet, solid credential that opened a door. I got a new job with better hours and better pay. The biggest win wasn't the money. It was the feeling of stepping into a life she told me I didn't deserve. At a custody exchange, she saw the company logo on my badge and froze. "Since when do you work there?" I said. "A few months." Her voice got sharp. "Why didn't you tell me?" I looked at her and said, "Because you don't get to vote on my life anymore." She stared at me like I'd stolen something from her. And in a way, I had. I'd stolen back my future. The one she spent years trying to convince me was impossible. Story 21. My ex tried to destroy my sanity by keeping me in constant emergencies. Every week it was something. The car suddenly needed repairs. The kid might be sick. A bill was confusing. A school form was missing. During the marriage, I was the permanent firefighter. After divorce, she kept calling like nothing changed, like I was still her crisis hotline. At first, I helped because I didn't want my kid to suffer. Then I noticed a pattern. The emergencies always appeared right after I had something going on. A dinner with friends, a work presentation, a weekend trip. She didn't want help. She wanted control over my calendar. So I set one boundary. Everything goes through email or the parenting app, and anything urgent gets a photo or a document attached. The emergencies magically decreased. Then she got angry. "Why are you being so difficult?" I said. "I'm being organized." One day she tried a classic trap. She called crying about an unpaid bill and implied the lights might get shut off. I asked for the bill number. She hesitated. I asked again. She snapped, "Wow, you've changed." I replied, "Yes, I verify things now." At the next exchange, she looked at me like she was searching for the old me, the guy who would panic and rush to save her. When she didn't find him, she tried the last move she had. Guilt. "You used to care." I said, "I care about our kid, not your chaos." Her face tightened like she'd tasted something bitter. Because she finally realized that the man she could hijack with drama was gone, and the replacement was someone who asked for receipts. Story 22. She tried to destroy my reputation as a father by turning every tiny mistake into a character indictment. If I packed the wrong snack, I was neglectful. If I forgot a school spirit day, I was uninvolved. She'd message me like a prosecutor. The kids were disappointed again. Do better. For a while, I felt like I was constantly on trial. Like parenting wasn't parenting. It was being graded by someone who wanted me to fail. So I stopped playing defense and started building a system. Shared calendar. Checklists. Backup clothes. Emergency contacts. I learned the teachers' names. I showed up early. I became the reliable parent not out of spite, but because it felt good to be steady. Then my kid's teacher made an offhand comment at pickup. "He's so calm after weekends with you. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." That compliment spread. Not as gossip, just as reality. My ex noticed the shift when she tried to complain in front of another parent and got awkward silence instead of sympathy. Later, she confronted me. "You're trying to make me look like the bad parent." I said, "No, I'm trying to be a good parent." She scoffed. "You weren't like this with me." I looked at her and said, "Because with you, everything was performance. With the kids, it's real." Her eyes narrowed, like she wanted to argue but couldn't. Because she'd been so focused on making me fail that she never noticed I could simply improve. And once you improve quietly, the narrative collapses on its own. Story 23. My ex tried to destroy me by attacking my friendships. She didn't ban me from seeing friends. She did something nastier. She made it exhausting. If I went out, she'd accuse me of cheating. If I invited someone over, she'd sulk and pick a fight later. Eventually, my friends stopped coming around because they didn't want the tension. After divorce, she still tried to isolate me. She'd text mutual friends warnings about me being unstable. She'd show up to group events and act like the wounded hero. So I rebuilt a social life from scratch. New gym buddies, a hiking group, co-workers I actually trusted, people who knew me as I was, not through her lens. It felt like learning to breathe again. Months later, a mutual friend told me my ex had been asking, "Why doesn't he come around anymore?" Like she couldn't stand not being the gatekeeper to my world. The moment she realized she'd failed was at our kid's birthday party. We agreed to keep it civil. She arrived expecting to be the main character. Instead, I had friends there, people she didn't know, helping set up, laughing with my kid, treating me like a normal human. She pulled me aside and hissed, "Who are these people?" I said. "My friends," she blinked. "Since when?" I shrugged. "Since I stopped living in your shadow." Her expression went tight, almost offended. She couldn't smear me to people who'd never heard her story. She couldn't poison rooms she wasn't in. And she couldn't stand the idea that I had a life she couldn't access or edit. Story 24. My ex tried to destroy my confidence by constantly comparing me to other men. Her coworker's husband, her friend's boyfriend, random dudes on Instagram. He plans dates. He fixes things. He knows how to lead. It was never about those men. It was about keeping me in a permanent deficit. After divorce, I realized how much of my anxiety wasn't who I was. It was the constant sense of being evaluated. So I stopped competing in her imaginary contest. I worked on myself in ways that mattered to me. I got better at cooking. I learned basic home repairs. I started lifting. I started speaking up at work. Not to become some alpha fantasy, just to feel capable in my own skin. Then she started doing something weird. She began complimenting me. Not sincerely. Like she was testing if she could still steer me. "You're actually doing well. You look good. I'm proud of you." It felt like someone offering candy after years of biting you. At an exchange, she said, "I always knew you had potential." I laughed quietly. "That's funny. You spent years trying to convince me I didn't." Her smile flickered. "I was just pushing you." I said, "No. You were keeping me insecure so I wouldn't leave." She looked genuinely shocked, like she hadn't expected me to name it out loud. And that was it. That was the moment she realized I wasn't just stronger. I was aware. And awareness is the one thing you can't manipulate back into sleep. Story 25. My ex tried to destroy me by turning the divorce into a brand. She posted vague captions about surviving emotional abuse, curated selfies with inspirational quotes, and soaked up sympathy like it was currency. People would message me things like, "I hope you learn from this," without knowing a single fact. I wanted to scream. I wanted to post screenshots, defend myself, prove she was lying. But my lawyer warned me, public fights are forever, and they're never clean. So I went quiet. Not as surrender, strategy. I focused on the only audience that mattered. My kid, my employer, and my future. I kept every message calm and factual. I showed up on time. I paid what I owed. I stayed consistent. Months later, her online healing journey started getting holes. She'd contradict herself. She'd post about being terrified, then post about missing our old adventures. She'd say she was finally safe, then rage text me at midnight. People started noticing. Sympathy thinned. Then she tried to pivot. She messaged me, friendly. "We should be on good terms. For the sake of peace." I replied, "We can be civil. That's all." At the next exchange, she looked at me and said, "You're not even bothered by what I post?" I said, "I don't build my life in comment sections." Her jaw tightened, because she'd been trying to burn me with public opinion, and I'd stepped out of the fire entirely. A week later, a mutual friend told me she'd said, "He acts like I don't exist," and for the first time, I realized that was her real fear. Not that I'd hate her forever, but that I'd become so whole again that she didn't matter at all. Story 26. My ex didn't try to destroy my job. She tried to destroy my name. I ran a small side business. Nothing flashy, just weekend work that paid for soccer fees and groceries. During the divorce, she told clients I was going through a breakdown and that it was safer to cancel. A couple people forwarded me her messages like, "Is this true?" She also reported my business page for impersonation and got it temporarily taken down. It felt personal because it was... She couldn't stand the idea that I had something that wasn't under her control. I almost shut it down. Instead, I rebuilt it like I was starting from zero. New branding, new website, clear policies, everything in writing. I stopped doing favors for friends of friends and started charging like a professional. I asked happy customers for reviews and actually posted them. I learned to say, "No, I'm booked," without guilt. A year later, I had steady work and a waiting list. The wild part? People started finding me because my reviews drowned out the old whispers. Then she called, first time in months, acting sugary. "Hey, I heard you're doing really well. I'm happy for you." I said, "Thanks. What do you need?" She paused, then tried the pivot. "My friend needs what you do." I told her you'd give her a discount because, history. I laughed. "No discounts." Her tone went sharp. "Wow, you're really full of yourself now." I said, "No, I'm just not cheap anymore." Silence. You could hear the math happening in her head. She tried to erase my reputation, and now she was asking to borrow it. Story 27. My ex's favorite insult was that I was weak. Not physically, emotionally. If I ever admitted I was stressed, she'd smirk and say, "You couldn't survive without me." When we split, she doubled down. She told people I was spiraling, that I was barely functioning, and she'd casually mention how I always needed her to manage life. What she didn't expect was that I'd get sober. I wasn't a falling down drunk, but I used alcohol the way exhausted people do, to turn the volume down. After the divorce, I realized I was either going to numb out until I disappeared, or I was going to choose myself. So I quit. I started therapy. I started journaling like a cliche. I built a routine that didn't leave room for midnight doom. Months later, my skin cleared. My sleep stabilized. My patience came back. I stopped reacting to her bait texts. She hated that part the most, because her old buttons weren't connected anymore. Then she tried a new tactic, concern. She started texting things like, "I worry you're not handling stress well," and "Please don't do anything stupid." She even suggested I relax with a drink at a family event, like she was offering a peace treaty. At a kid drop-off, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're acting like you're better than everyone now." I said, "I'm acting like I want to live." Her mouth opened, then closed, because she'd spent years trying to convince me I was fragile. And there I was, doing the hardest thing quietly, without applause, without her. She didn't look angry in that moment. She looked defeated, like she'd been betting on my self-destruction and the house just lost. Story 28. My ex tried to destroy me with paperwork. Not normal divorce stuff, weaponized bureaucracy. She'd file motion after motion, complain about violations that didn't exist, accuse me of things that were impossible to prove either way. The goal wasn't to win. The goal was to keep me broke, exhausted, and constantly showing up to defend myself. And it worked for a while. I was always stressed, always missing work, always paying for another urgent attorney call. Then a clerk at the courthouse gave me the best advice I've ever got. Bring a timeline. So I did. I made a binder. Tabs. Dates. Screenshots. Receipts. Every exchange documented. I stopped writing emotional paragraphs and started replying like a customer service rep. I learned the difference between respond and react. At a hearing, my ex tried her usual performance. Teary voice, dramatic pauses, big claims with no specifics. The judge asked, "Do you have evidence?" She looked at her lawyer. Her lawyer looked at the ceiling. Then the judge looked at me. I slid my binder forward and said calmly, "Yes, Your Honor. I have a record for each claim." You could feel the air change. The judge didn't just deny her motion. He warned her about wasting court resources and hinted at sanctions if it continued. Outside, she cornered me in the hallway and hissed, "You think you're so smart now?" I said, "No, I'm just not confused anymore." Her face did this tight little twist, like she'd realized the version of me she could bully with chaos had been replaced by someone who could outlast her. She wasn't scared of me. She was scared of the system finally seeing what she'd been doing. Story 29. My ex tried to destroy my good guy image because she hated that people liked me. In the marriage, she'd say, "Everyone thinks you're so nice, but I know the real you." After the divorce, she pushed that narrative hard. Subtle little stories to neighbors, PTA parents, church people, nothing you could sue over. Just enough to make you feel watched. I didn't fight it. I leaned into being consistent. I started coaching a youth team because my kid asked me to. I showed up early with cones and extra water. I learned every kid's name. I stayed calm when parents got weird. Over time, other coaches started asking me for help. One mom told me, "My son listens to you more than anyone." I didn't post it. I didn't broadcast it. I just kept showing up. My ex noticed when people stopped greeting her with sympathy and started greeting me with respect. At a tournament, she walked up while I was packing gear and said, loud enough for others to hear, "So you're really doing the super dad act?" I smiled and said, "It's not an act. It's a schedule." She tried again, quieter. "You're only doing this to make me look bad." I said, "If you think a man being present makes you look bad, that's not my problem." She stood there, stunned, because she'd tried to take the one thing she couldn't stand, my reputation for being steady. And instead, she'd built a front row seat to it getting stronger without her.